Okay, so here we have one with some CW Flash seasonal villains. By that I mean these are the main villains, of course, of an entire season. So I haven't made lots of adjustments here. Good. Okay, so got that going for that. All right, so looking at Cobalt Blue, which of course was the final Flash villain, and Red Death. So both of these, of course, ended up being characters that either appeared in other Arrowverse shows, even though it's weird calling it Arrowverse when Flash was the last show for it. So Cobalt Blue was brought back to be the end all be all Flash villain. So of course this is a character who killed themselves earlier in the franchise, and then was brought back towards the end. Red Death was a variation of a multiverse comic character where it was an evil version of Batman who also had the abilities of the Flash. Of course, in the CW, they didn't have the rights to use Batman, so instead they used Batwoman and gave her the powers. So as always, if you disagree with some of these things, just let me know in the comments. Of course, with this being characters of similar powers, certain things are kind of difficult to kind of gauge. We're also looking at how much budget does a CW have when it comes to doing special effects on lots of these characters. Other aspect of this too, if you like these sorts of things, if you want me to do Ezra versus Grant, I mean, by all means, let's go through it. All right, so intelligence. I'm gonna give this one to Cobalt Blue specifically because Cobalt Blue is the avatar of the negative Speed Force, so therefore has access to a tremendous amount of just information, just from a general standpoint. And look at Red Death. Red Death, while having great tactical knowledge, actually required other people to help build the Cosmic Trump to get back into her time. So looking at someone who has a near infinite amount of information versus someone who, while being incredibly tactical, still needed help when it came to building a device to help her get back to her own time. Fine ability. Now with her, of course, being a Batwoman, and with the way the CW likes to do, if you are a person who puts on any sort of suit, you become significantly better at fighting hand-to-hand combat. You're also looking at someone too who, functionally having a Bat-style moniker, ends up being very efficient when it comes to fighting versus what we saw with Cobalt Blue, who even as human guys normally didn't have a tremendous level of fighting prowess. Strength. Again, going with Red Death. And this again just has to do with the way the CW kind of seem to do. Once you put on a superhero suit of any sort, you go from being street level to, like peak human, if not the bare bones of metahuman. And if you ever watched any of the Batwoman season 2, I don't recommend it. The amount of things that she was able to do with people much larger than her own size definitely does lend credence to the ability that, once you throw on a suit, you do gain a small level of superhuman strength. More than what we saw from what Cobalt Blue would do. Speed. This one's kind of a wash. I mean, they both showed that they were the equal, if not slightly faster than the Flash. And that almost comes down much more to just limitations on how much they could do for a budget and really how fast you actually can go. I know you might say, but there's other things that Cobalt Blue could do that Red Death couldn't do. We'll get to that a little bit later on. All right, invulnerability. While both of them had the intangibility, as you obviously tell with Red Death, you're looking at someone who had a Batwoman, so a Batman style suit, so definitely much more from an armor standpoint. So you have someone who's wearing body armor, someone who's not wearing a level of body armor. So that's just one of those things where you're looking at it's Batman plus a power. So you're looking at someone who already naturally had a better ability of wearing a level of armor for additional level of protection that we don't see with Cobalt Blue. Durability. This one to Cobalt Blue. One of the things we did see with Red Death is they were able to tax her and her overall levels of abilities. Now it's Cobalt Blue. I mean, Cobalt Blue being a direct avatar really didn't have to worry that much about being tired or being worn out or even losing speed for a protracted period of time, which they were able to do with Red Death. Energy projection. Both of them had the same lightning effect that we saw Flash do. So that almost comes down to more of just a limitation of the overall budget. Both were able to throw lightning bolts, both in different styles of lightning. So their raw ability at range would have been relatively the same. And even watching them battle the Flash while throwing the lightning bolts, they were normally shown to be comparable, if not a little bit stronger than the Flash. So you're looking at two characters who are more powerful as well as being equal, dependent upon how the writer really wanted to write some of the scenes for the Flash. Because if the Flash is faster than most of their opponents, you have to do other things to make them seem much more, impressive, much more dangerous. Versatility. Definitely with Cobalt Blue here. If you looked at the amount of abilities he was able to do, uh, like I mentioned earlier when it came to the intelligence part, Red Death needed help to try to go back to her own timeline and to go backwards in time and to try to functionally be able to solve all of crime, where Cobalt Blue was able to easily jump back and forth through time, jump back and forth through just about anything that he needed to do, whether it was take control of somebody's mind, functionally bring someone back from the dead, because again, this is the negative speed force entity we're talking about here. So if you look at things right now, we're pretty much tied up, 3 apiece. Again, you are looking at two large season villains for the Flash, so it would make sense that they're them fighting each other would be fairly comparable up to a point because they're both designed to be, this is the big bad for the Flash for a season. Therefore, be able to do an entire season against one villain, that person has to be shown to have a level of skill, level of ability, and written by the same people. So it makes sense that when you're doing two different speedsters, they would have a level of commonality. But X Factor. So again, we're looking at Red Death was able to make a lot of psychic imprints of herself and patrol the whole city. Cobalt Blue was able to bring other speedsters back from the dead and was able to bring other characters back. So I could see in a fight like this, Red Death would initially give Cobalt Blue a bit of an issue, primarily because of how much more aggressive Red Death would be as opposed to someone like the Flash. However, given what Cobalt Blue has the ability to do, whether it's bring in other speedsters, the ability to make psychic copies of yourself is fantastic. It's a really cool ability. However, pretty much the moment you're comparing that versus, oh, I can just bring an army of other speedsters. Oh, I can bring back pretty much any other major season villain who's battled the Flash. And I can do it pretty easily. Oh, and I also can kind of jump back and forth between reality and time. So, in the fight of these two, again, we are looking at limitations just based upon what the show had the ability to do. Pretty much once you showed, here's how fast this person is, here's the color of their lightning, and everyone throws lightning at each other. I mean, that kind of gives you your speed as well as your energy projections, those being fairly comparable. One could make the argument that Red Death needed the cosmic treadmill in order to go back in time, which is based upon speed. That Cobalt Blue doesn't have that limitation when it comes to traversing, time, space, and reality. But I view to put that more as like a versatility, because when it's raw speed, they end up being fairly comparable in that aspect. So otherwise, we disagree. So the comment section is for. I'm going to try to do a few of these this quarter. I do have a bunch of other wrestling ones that I'm working through, as well as maybe doing some with trios groups or 4-person groups in the world of professional wrestling. I'll probably do a few more that are comic based, more based when it comes to TV shows and movies. Those are a lot easier to get through than trying to pour through literally thousands of character appearances throughout the comics.